D-man? Where is
Where
he?
is this guy at?
Where is he?
He's never
Where's this
late.
guy?
Welcome to
He's
the
never
90s
late.
Match Podcast, home of all things Newcastle United, hosted by three lifelong Newcastle United fans. Myself, D-Man, as you can see, I'm not in my usual surroundings. I am out sunning up on holiday in sunnier climates, so I won't be able to join live this week, but Jefferson AC will be holding down the fort. But yeah, just to give you a taste of where I am at the moment.
This guy. Is he taking
Big
the
things coming
piss?
soon. So yeah, take it away, lads. First things up, the recent comments from Eddie Howe in the interview that he did a couple of days ago. What were your thoughts? Do you think he committed himself to the club, or do you think he left things open? So yeah, let me know what you think.
So first of all, he don't turn up, and then he shows us his lovely resort in that lovely sunny weather. Well, I hope you enjoy yourself, D man. No, joking, brother. We miss you, man. We miss you.
Indeed,
Um,
indeed.
so he's I guess he's posed the question about the Eddie interview. So I guess we might as well cover that straight off the bat. Um,
Yeah, it's a very, very hot topic, and because obviously in the last week there was 3 interviews within a week, which I almost felt like we're spoiled for choice in that way because we rarely get interviews like this, and then we get almost like 3 buses come at once in that sense. And the final bus that arrived at the bus stop was the Eddie Howe interview. Now, if you've been living under a rock, you're not aware. Eddie Howe recently gave an interview to NUFC TV and also Sky Sports, and he was covering and addressing several things, saying about, it's been a difficult summer, lots of changes at the club, and a lot of work going on behind the scenes. He's also reflecting about the preseason training at Adidas HQ. He's also referring to saying about the team spirit's been good, etc. Lewis Hall and Lloyd Kelly are important players to us. But one of the things he did mention was regarding his position at Newcastle. They're talking about as long as that I can still do the job in the way I want to do it, I see myself here. Because obviously the number one question, and I think even the first question people are asking in this interview, is about himself in a position of England. Because at the moment, it seems to be his name is top of everyone's list of Eddie Howe should become England manager, etc. And up to this point, he's been quite quiet. Before we get into this as well, something that's quite funny, what I did realize is that Eddie Howe being Eddie Howe does that usual thing where it's like, oh yeah, I wasn't aware of like Gareth Southgate resigning. And I was just like, what do you mean? The whole world knows he resigned. And he tried to act like as if like he didn't know, like he's the last person on the planet to know. My guy.
yeah,
So
that's Eddie being Eddie, isn't it?
yeah, so what was your first thoughts when he started replying saying about as long as I can do the job that I can do in a position that he can do, he see himself as a Newcastle manager?
Well, I think the thing is that the perception has been about media stirring up things for us as fans, kind of sensationalizing things. And in true nature, I actually saw the Sky Sports interview before I saw the Newcastle United interview,
Hmm.
where he's displaying arguably two different demeanors. So I guess in the in the Sky Sports interview, he was talking about his unwavering commitment to the club. He seemed very, very defensive and insecure. You know, basically someone that had been put out. Essentially, that's how it felt. He felt a bit more like the odd one out. And normally Eddie's quite stoic, but he seemed quite emotional, which I
Mm,
think for him is odd. You know, it sends alarm bells, and I get it. People be saying you're looking out for stuff, you're reading between the lines, but when he was talking about things like the whole PSR thing with Elliot Anderson and things like that, you could
yeah.
see his emotions and his facial expressions change. And it was kind of the same, when he was talking about, not being unsettled with his job, the way he goes about his job. and those kind of things. But he used words such as like having Amanda and Murdad setting a special environment. What is that? What is that? And then on the other end, you know, he talks about the special relationship that he has with the fans. So it
Mm,
felt almost like I feel slightly alienated by the changes that have been going on around me. But hey, I've got you, the fans, who have always had my back. You know, it was almost like he was imploring for that support due
mhm,
to the way he may feel with the lack of support he's had. Because the way probably see it is my biggest allies have left the club. There is potentially a lack of security. All of a sudden, I've now got a boss above me, someone I have to report to, and they've also hired someone who's going to be analyzing the way I train and do my job. So
mm,
naturally, yeah, he's going to feel insecure, and it felt a bit cagey, you know. And
mm.
like I said, different energies from both interviews. I mean, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I definitely caught that. His vibe definitely feels off. Now, we've seen Eddie Howe interviews numerous of times. I mean, he does post-match interviews, whatever it is. And Eddie, though, even though he likes to like not give things away, I think it was a bit odd how on the Sky Sports interview, he's almost a bit more unleashed. Like he felt like he had to say things in a certain way. No matter how cryptic it was, he was saying things. And it's almost just a bit like, it's a bit weird you saying that, knowing that you're at the Adidas HQ, and that's where they are interviewing him. At the Adidas HQ as well, you got CEO Darren Eales, he's there. Paul Mitchell's there, and also the recent performance director as well. They're all there, so they're all like monitoring the teams, etc. So knowing that he had an interview to the side and went off like that was a bit odd because it's just a bit like it's almost like don't you not all talk to each other? Now I say that because I'm starting to like theorize now a little bit of like what actually happened because obviously when Amanda exited and Murdad exited as well, I think it's becoming a bit more evident now that though people saying, "Oh yeah, it was planned, it was going to happen at some point," I don't think no one at the club knew that was going to happen. It just happened. So everyone's kept in the quiet, and apparently the appointment of sporting director Paul Mitchell was something that was just done. Like no one knew was happening. I think everyone. It's almost like when we knew about it, the public, the fans, the staff knew, and the coaching staff, everyone else at the club knew at the same time, which is crazy, right? It almost sounds like almost a bit of a power play because at this point of time now, we do understand that this was a PIF move, no doubt. I think that was a hiring from Yazza to almost to say, you know, I'm going to appoint this person. This is what we want to do. But I think that speaks volumes, reading between the lines, because it's then like, was this not communicated with Eddie Howe before?
Mm,
So you can almost understand a little bit of his like being uncomfortable with that matter.
mm,
Now, what's quite interesting, what he said about Paul Mitchell, he said, in respect of Paul Mitchell, hopefully we can help each other and have a good working relationship to help NUFC compete at the top end and fight for trophies. He's a good appointment, a good decision maker, has strong ideas about how he wants to take the team forward. Hopefully he can feel the love from everyone and have a great career here. And, you know, he thanked Amanda and Murdad as well for what they've done and how they made like you said before, a special playing environment, a special environment, which was is a weird comment because I was just like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? It's almost like,
it's like
is
saying
it
I
like being
liked how things were before. They were
right,
cozy,
right? It's almost
cozy.
saying that because it's almost like saying now that Amanda and Murdad was a nice, comforting situation between them all, but now that's gone. It's almost like there's no more shields, there's no more comfort. It's now like a new bit of, let's say, it's a change in infrastructure at the end of the day. And it's quite interesting, obviously, because he is understanding, you know, reason why Paul Mitchell was brought in as well. And we will get into the details about Paul Mitchell's interview as well, because Paul
Yeah,
Mitchell said a lot of interesting
he
things
said a lot.
which really opened up my eye because you know when I saw this interview was going to be 10 minutes of Paul Mitchell, I was almost like rubbing my hands. I was just like, yes, man, because those of you who are familiar with the podcast here on 90s Mags, you know that I've been screaming out for sporting director / football director what is the difference between the two? But because I did say that the club cannot operate without one. It just can't. We can't do that, because what would happen is, when it comes to signings and structure or academy building and such, you're almost relying it purely on Eddie Howe and the team that surrounds him to orchestrate that. So, there's a few little rumblings within this and theorizing now, but I do wonder if, because Eddie as well likes to be hands-on. Let's face it, he's a hands-on coach. He likes being hands-on. He likes to know all bits and pieces of moving parts. We know that his nephew, Andy Howe, is in the scouting network as well. Like, he's responsible for some of the scouting. But now that we got Paul Mitchell coming in and almost like overseeing this infrastructure, is that making Eddie Howe feel a bit uncomfortable now, because he's realizing things are going to change? You may not have the sayings on all things, and also Paul Mitchell, has a respectable, very good CV of quality of what he's done in the past, of success. The club are going to operate in a new way to hopefully follow that and reach success as well.
Yeah. I think what's interesting though, AC, is that you touched on in the NUFC interview, he talks about how they can work better together. It sounded like he was coming from a more collaborative mindset. But in the Sky Sports interview, he says, because he almost sounds disorientated and a bit jaded, he says there's been so much change. We need a period of time to understand more about each other and how we are going to work. Set the boundaries. Wow. For the benefit of Newcastle. Now, this is what I'm talking about, where it feels like he's trying to implore that support from the fans, because after that, he says, England is not important at all. I think that's a separate topic, right? It's all about Newcastle United. I feel passionately about bringing success here long term. I have a special relationship with them, i.e. the fans, and I'm fiercely determined to win a trophy. So I think we're talking about two different energies and two different interviews. And it's funny how in one he talks about, right, we need to kind of work better together. He's a great appointment, blah, blah, blah. To he's almost defensive here, saying we need to kind of set some boundaries and this needs to work for me. And I think what is clearly transpiring here, and I think we'll cover this more when we move on to Paul Mitchell, is maybe because things are gathering pace. We know we've talked about this in previous pods that we're behind. We're trying to grow the club on and off the pitch. And as a result of that, Eddie's probably being swept up in that, in understanding he's not a manager, he's a head coach, and a head coach has a defined role. And you have to report to the director of football or sporting director. We have a structure. So think about Man United. For years, they wanted a structure. We've got that now. So he has to assimilate to the structure. In all due respect, the size of our club is bigger than the clubs he's managed. So it should be deemed as progress for him. And a lot of clubs, modern clubs, have this model now. So even if he was to leave us and go somewhere else, he's going to have to get used to this. So there was a little bit where it felt like he was spitting his dummy out a little bit. But also that kind of the rug has been swept underneath him. And that's why I was referencing in, I don't know if it was the last podcast I talked about when we discussed this, about an undertaking. It's not a takeover. It's more of an undertaking. That's maybe from his perspective, how he's feeling. And he's bound to feel sort of insecure. And that was definitely coming out in that Sky Sports interview. A very different energy.
Yeah. And I do wonder, when looking at some of the footage of them at the Adidas HQ, we're doing pre-season. By the way, they all look like having a good time. The sun's shining, it looks nice. They all look good in their new kits and that. But one thing I did notice, it shows clips of Paul Mitchell and the sporting director as well. And I think I've forgotten his name. Is it?
I remember his surname, Bunce, but can't remember the first name.
I'm going to say James Bunce, but I could be incorrect here. Listeners, do let me know for a correction. But it showed some clips. Go on. What are you going to say?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think it is James Bunce.
Okay, James Bunce. Okay, I was good. That was a good stab in the dark there to remember. But it showed some clips of James Bunce and Paul Mitchell at the sidelines watching the training and watching the routines of the training. And it got me thinking a bit, because there's been theories for a while. We can put this out there now. There's been theories that Eddie Howe's training regimes are quite intense, right? And has been for quite some time. And we had a lot of injuries last season, like record injuries. But then I was doing a little bit of like back checking as well for his time at Bournemouth. Also, a lot of injuries, right? And, you know, the performance director, James Bunce, is there to obviously help with physio, medical, etc. And obviously, they want to reduce the injuries. And I do wonder, when they're analysing the training, there might have to be tweaks to the training. Now, I wonder if someone like Eddie Howe may not like that, because now you're going to get a situation where people are almost going to like tell you how to do your job a little bit, right? And probably Eddie Howe doesn't like almost like being under the microscope in that kind of way, being analyzed of how you're like working with the players and such. But at the same time, we're getting to Paul Mitchell in a bit as well. But I know Paul Mitchell has applauded Eddie Howe for his man-to-man management and stuff. He respects him and stuff. He even said as well that, you know, one of the reasons why he came to Newcastle was the pull of the head coach, Eddie Howe, which I think is really, really interesting. And also he did state as well of working together, and they know it'd be a good, you know, a good collaboration if it comes together and works well and such. But I just think, you know, Eddie Howe being the way he is and knowing that he can be quite so tunnel focused and so like extreme, like, no doubt, I think he's a person that, you know, he breathes and sleeps football all the time. Apparently, he's like first in the club every morning, 6 a.m. Bam, 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 bam. This guy, he's quite OCD with it. Now, you can imagine his training routines are going to be OCD to that nature as well. I do wonder there, the rumblings as well. You now got these people coming in to analyze this. And, you know, there'll be other things they'll be analyzing, because, you know how I always moan and always talk about the substitutions. I think that as well be analysed too. It'd be like, why are you waiting until like 70 minutes to do substitutions when you could be like getting players off earlier and making sure you don't overrun them and such, you know? And then because another thing, and I'm not going on to a bit of a like a long talk here, but what's interesting about Paul Mitchell and what he did at Monaco, right? Monaco had 20 injuries in their first team. 20 when he arrived, which is like ridiculous. 20 injuries. But then what he realized is that you have to making sure that there's a balance between the players that are playing and the rest periods, and, you know, and that was part of the routines and that he did in order to making sure then it become the lack of injuries. Obviously, there's other things into it as well. There's the medical, there's the food, there's the supplements as well. All of this comes into it as well. And also the routines of training as well. But I do think in this big picture here, these are some of the things that are building up to this reason why almost like Eddie Howe feels a bit rattled, and that key things we're saying, as long as I can still do my job, which I think is such a weird thing to say. It's like, why would you say that? Why would you say that? To Sky Sports as well. To Sky Sports.
That's a press disaster. That is a press disaster. Because as you mentioned earlier, everything seems so positive. You know, Darren Eales was talking about our growth off the pitch, the profit we're making, revenues, all those sort of things. Sounds like we're going up, up, up. Paul Mitchell, standout appointment, you know, talking about that purpose, that missions-based approach in terms of making us a better club, moving us onto the global scale, for example. And then there's Eddie, that mainly he's got that emotion of, nah, this ain't working for me. That's what was coming off. And don't get me wrong, he's entitled to react because he's only a human being, and it's all probably very fresh for him. Because you can imagine if it was us, we'd probably be a bit pissed as well, you know. And the changes are happening around him really fast. But yeah, I think in terms of the order, in terms of the way the videos came through, was a bit of a bummer. Kind of, you know, it killed the vibe a little bit, you know.
It definitely did. I think what we're going to do now, we're going to check in with our good co-host, Mr. D-Man from the pool. Once again, he's on holiday at the moment, and whilst he's still there, he's still thinking about Newcastle. Even though I told him don't think about Newcastle when you're on holiday. But let's face it, there's never a slow news week here at Newcastle. So what we're going to do now we're going to get into this little snippet from D-Man himself.
So before the Eddie Howe interview, we had the interview from Darren Eales, and then followed by the sit down with Paul Mitchell, both which I think were more positive. Was very encouraging what they had to say, especially the Paul Mitchell one. I liked what he had to say, what he's about. We did an episode on him, so we know his background, but to see him talk about it as an in-play of Newcastle United was very encouraging. What do you guys think of it? Did you enjoy it? Are you encouraged? Do you think we've got the best in the business? Also with the Darren Eales, because I've seen a lot of people saying, raising questions about him, how he's handled certain things of late. But were you infused by it? What are your thoughts?
So yeah, D-Man's almost just right on the money there of what we're just recently talking about the other two interviews and how we responded to those, or how it was people were responding in general. Now, the first interview was Darren Eales. Now, first of all, when this guy steps to the microphone, I know it's going to be a very just like by the book, by the numbers, very like he gives you the straight facts, and I like that. And I remember quite a while ago, he was giving us the straight facts about PSR. In fact, it was people like him who rattled it about PSR and almost like bring it to the limelight of like, remember he's saying that at some point we will have to sell a player that you might not want to be selling. He's like saying it straight up. And I'm just like, I appreciate that, Tell me how it is. Don't sugarcoat it for me. Tell me how it is. But going back to what you said earlier within the Darren Eales interview, it's the first one. It was really positive. It reassuring. They did ask him about PSR. He explained about Anderson and Minter having to do that kind of thing, which we all kind of knew it was a thing that, as a club, they had to stay, in his words, compliant as a Newcastle United club, because obviously with PSR in the Premier League, we don't want no points deduction, right? It's something that had to be done. And then he spoke about a little bit about the revenue side of things, that year by year, we got 30% increase on revenue. I think he said that when the takeover happened, it was like 140 mil revenue or something like that. But now we're at the point of like north of 300 mil, which is like excellent, right? Because it shows that as a club, they've done a lot in a short space of time. But one of the key things he did say that got my ears like pricked up a bit, he's talking about, we continue to work with companies and such. We've got partners and such that in the background that hopefully soon we can come into the light. And I was a bit like, this is interesting, because I think we said before about why isn't there almost like, let's say, a training sponsor on the top, or, a training ground sponsor. But it sounds like to me those things are in the pipeline and they will come. It's a matter of when. And I think he did say in the next few months, which is another interesting thing, because it's like he didn't have to say that to us, but it sounds like to me something's going to happen quite soon. We're going to get more injection into the club, so which is really promising, and that almost is going to answer a lot of other issues as well. In general, we've got to bring more money into the club, and I think with the recent addition of Adidas, obviously, that's going to be a massive boost on sales and just in general, because Adidas is a big pool. And, with them at the Adidas HQ recently, we're seeing they got the facility to train there. By the way, I do want to say as well, the Adidas training tops with the feather on it looks good, right?
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be getting that. And obviously now we got the shirts being leaked as well with the away kit and the third kit. Looking good, right? What do you think?
Looking good. I think as well the fact that I think we've got Adidas elite status, which means our kit will be distributed definitely continentally. I think worldwide as well. So that will help with our merchandising and revenues. But I think some of the things you talked about that Darren Eales mentioned really, really important, because we can't underestimate that it's not just about what we see on the pitch, but it's off the pitch as well in terms of our growth as a club. I'm not saying we're going to become a super club, but we definitely need to grow, because we know about we know about the 14 years of stagnation we had under Ashley. So that means we're behind, and it feels like these comms was stuff we was complaining about when we were having to sell Minte and Anderson. So it feels like a belated sort of comms to say, hey, listen, this is what we've had to do, but we're working at this. This is important to us. We understand what's important to you. And that there is some intent and initiative there. I think there are some things around the direction of travel for the club as well. So when they talked about the appointment of, when Darren Eales talked about the appointment of Paul Mitchell, I think he was looking at things like his global vision and his experience with other clubs. So that global network. So it means this is the trajectory he wants to see for the club. And that's okay because it means we then have a sense of direction. It shows that the owners are serious about this. And I guess the lack of comms before, we were fearing, hey, are they looking to duck out or something? But it's come full 360 where they're looking like, yeah, we're looking to step things up in that regard. But one thing that's alarming, and again, we'll talk about this a bit more when we look at Paul Mitchell's interview. One thing Darren Eales does mention is about the injuries, and that's the consistency there. Him and Mitchell about the importance of looking at those injuries, because I think ultimately the board weren't pleased with it. They're going to deem that as the reasons for failure, and hence why
Absolutely.
James Bunce was employed as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, that because it almost makes you realize that the injuries was an issue. We knew it was an issue, but it feels like to me it was a massive issue, because also, in the past we didn't want to like use injuries as an excuse. But I'm wondering in Eddie Howe's situation, he's almost just like, there's not much I can do. I have injuries, and I do get it, because at one point we literally had no subs. It was like a starting 11, and that was it. Like really, really bad. I don't think in my lifetime I've seen a football team go through that much a struggle of injuries.
No.
I've been watching football for a long time. I don't think I've seen it that bad. Like it was so bad.
On the bench, three keepers on the bench, academy players. No one you could bring on.
Yeah, and it was at a point as well. We have to take our minds back that every single time we had a game, every single time someone was injured. Someone was injured. Wilson and Isaac would be like, one in, one out, one in, one out. They were just like, almost just like patting the baton to each other through the hallways. Like, hey man, yeah, I'm off for the next 2 weeks. How about you? Yeah, I'm in for 2 weeks. See you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
But it's making you realize that the performance director, James Bunce here, is like such an important thing that it could be game changing. And because the history with Paul Mitchell and James Bunce worked together at Monaco, and like I said before, they had 20 players injured in their first team. I don't think people understand how bad that is, but I think I said in the past podcast as well that Monaco, they were in a really dire situation, a lot worse than we are at the moment. Don't get me wrong, we got some things that need issues, but they were able to fix that and do that. So I feel like the James Bunce perspective and, Paul Mitchell, it's almost like the first thing they're going to try to address, to making sure that this forthcoming season, they want to get the best out the players that we have as much as possible. Now, the next thing I do want to mention about Eales here, he did mention about Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe working together for recruitment. Another thing that's a bit interesting to me, because let's face it, right? Rumor mill as it stands is that when Dan Ashworth was at the club, apparently Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth didn't get along. I think that's just a thing that we can say, I'm not saying it's a fact here, but it's so close to the fact it has to be true. Now, I think also the rumor mill is that Eddie Howe obviously wanted to do things his particular way. Once again, I'm not saying it's a fact, but that's what we're alluding to here. So it's quite interesting that with Paul Mitchell coming in, it's just like, I think Eales sees it that like they have to work together and find a way in order to do the recruitment and such. Because let's face it, Paul Mitchell, we had an episode talking about Paul Mitchell in a bit more depth, is that his CV of players that he's brought into teams is ridiculous, right? His scouting is like ace in the hole. It's like nothing else comes second to that. And when we look at our recent signings, and I'm going to highlight this a little quickly because I know we're going to talk about transfers in a bit as well. But I kind of wish a little bit that Paul Mitchell came in a bit earlier, because I do wonder if people like Lloyd Kelly, number one, our favorite John Ruddy. D-Man's not here to laugh, but I'm gonna laugh for you, D-Man. But Mr. John Ruddy himself, Ruds. No, and then we got the other goalkeeper who I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name. In fact, Eddie Howe can't even pronounce his name either, apparently, because even Eddie was just like, I think what did he call him for the nickname? Remember?
Oddie.
He's calling him Oddie. Imagine that. Imagine like people just calling you Oddie, some short name. But anyway, so far we've signed those players, right? 2 goalkeepers and Lloyd Kelly, right? And we can get into another player that we have signed as well in a bit. We're talking about the defender, the Serbian guy, young kid has come through. But I think, glaring as it is, those signings were done when Paul Mitchell wasn't assigned, right? And I kind of feel like those signings are very Eddie Howe signings to that degree. Don't get me wrong, Lloyd Kelly was on a free, right? He's on a free contract and such. We ain't got to pay no fee, this and that. But my guy, his record injury list is quite bad. And in fact, today on socials and stuff like that, it's been now rumored that Lloyd Kelly is actually injured at this point of time. In fact, our first friendly game against Hull, he's not selected to play. He won't play against the game against Hull because he's injured, right? Also, we got Cameron Wilson injured. I don't want to get into that right now, but my point being is that Paul Mitchell should have come in a bit earlier, hopefully. But I think also this is the thing, Man United was stalling with Ashworth, and I think it delayed us a bit. So it's almost like we had to get Mitchell in when the window started, because part of me has a theory. I've always got my theories. But the Serbian defender that we recently bought, the young kid, talented kid, who's meant to be amazing, that smells like a Paul Mitchell, type of player, because it's young. He can come into the team immediately, which I think he will, and I hope they do. Please don't put him on loan. Please do not put him on loan.
Serbian second division. He was in the Serbian second division. I mean, we'll come on to that, I guess, in a bit. But
we'll come into it in a bit. Yeah,
I think what you're starting to itch on is Darren Eales made a point of talking about us punching above our weight and making sure we get the best out of the players we have. The issue with that is, as you've pointed, though, we've got injury-prone players, and we've also got players that are entering their last year of contract, and those that are going to be considerably older. So Callum Wilson will be turning 33, I believe. Fabian Schär will be turning 33, etc. Dan Burn, all these kind of players. And I'm sure Mitchell's remit will be to bring the average age of the squad down. And make those kind of signings you were talking about, like Pedrag, like we had with Yankuba Minte, to get those players in for the future. So even if they don't play for us, if they've got resellable value, the cycle starts again. So we're going to be at a conundrum here where the senior players, Eddie's lieutenants on the pitch, are going to be the ones where they've got no resale value. And if we give them contract extensions, it's going to affect our PSR. So that's an immediate conundrum for Paul Mitchell, and probably where they're going to have loggerheads. And those might be some of those discussions they're saying, look, Fabian Shaw's really important to me. Dan Burns really important to me. I need them in the dressing room. And Paul Mitchell's going to say, yeah, but if we sign them on, it's going to cost X amount, which is going to affect us being able to sign this potential player, that potential player. So it's going to be an unsettling period, I think,
Yeah, it's almost like you could call it like a squad rebuild in that sense. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen. We are going to be in a situation where it will feel uneasy. We almost like don't know where we're at currently. And I don't know. It's going to be a bit weird, but I'm hoping that this summer window and a January to follow we start to do this, because otherwise, if we get to next summer, right? Let's just put this in perspective. If we get to summer and all these players are still there, we are going to be in a mess, because certain players are just not going to be worth anything. People just going to get them for free. We lose out on money. And it's been really interesting as well, when we can talk a little bit later about the transfer situation, how it's just like radio silent. Like, the silence is deafening right now, right? There's like nothing going on, and it's just making me wonder, like, what the hell is going on?
And
What is
other
going on?
clubs are making signings. Again, you look at Villa, saw Onana signing on the dotted line today. Even Man United, they've managed to get Lenny Yoro in. They've got
Hmm.
Joshua Zirkzee in. These are young, promising players on a
Hmm.
continental level.
Hmm.
Zirkzee should have been playing Champions League with Bologna. Lenny
Hmm.
Yoro was, really, if it wasn't over dispute over fees, he would have been going to Real Madrid. So again, I'd argue we were better than Man United. Well, they've nudged ahead of us now. They're
Hmm.
probably due to get Matthias de Ligt pretty soon as well.
I
And
know.
we've made no signings. So no credible, valuable signings that
Yeah.
will improve us, you know.
And we have to see it as that Man United, Aston Villa, I would say Tottenham as well, Chelsea,
Chelsea to an extent.
they are our competitors. And we have to remember as well, bringing it back to reality, this is this season with no Europe. We've got no extra games, except for domestic cups when they do come. But it's a one game a week, right? One game a week. And these other clubs, we'll see how they do and such with their cups. But naturally, man, the fatigue will come in the players. It will come. And it's really interesting seeing Villa, because I think they've got like 6 new signings so far. And I'm just like, Villa are not messing about. They almost like saw how we did our Champions League campaign and were just like, nah, we need to have replacements. Like, because you do need squad depth when it comes to Champions League. Players do get fatigued. And I think it does go back to, I'm not going to get too much into it now, but we didn't prepare ourselves in the best way as possible ahead of that Champions League campaign, because face it, like, I don't know, man. Lewis Hall, we brought him and such, but he barely got any
Two
play time.
fullbacks, two, not one, two, man.
Um, Tonali got banned. That was just unlucky, but I don't know, man. It's just like when it just weren't set up
Your
in a way.
due
But
diligence. If your recruitment's airtight, do your due diligence, man. Do your homework.
mm,
There must have been
exactly,
someone that could have found something out.
yeah, yeah. And speaking about recruitment, we have to like talk a little bit about Paul Mitchell's interview. And I'm becoming a bit of a fanboy of Paul Mitchell. I'm just like, I watched the interview, and to be honest, I watched it 3 times, because the first time
Wow.
I was like, damn, this guy's like giving me the good stuff, everything I want to hear, kind of thing. But the second time round, just like listen to it a bit again to see if I miss anything. And the third time listening to it, I started reading in between the lines. Now, with Paul Mitchell, it's that he comes across very professional, very knowledgeable. This guy has been around the block twice and come back, right? He knows a lot about infrastructure, like I said earlier, about the global infrastructure. When he worked at Red Bull, he was overseeing the Red Bull infrastructure of the clubs in America within the New York Red Bulls, obviously Leipzig as well, and the club in Brazil. So this guy has very aware of almost like 360-degree radar vision of how a club should be operating, not just from a recruitment, but just like infrastructure. Because he made a good point in his interview about the ability to hire not just external but internally as well. So he's talking about bringing players up. He's like, we need to be looking at bringing in like players when they're 9 years old. This guy is not messing about. He's really thinking about from the ground up. And I think that gives me a lot of confidence in terms of like, also we have to realize, and I'm aware of this anyway, that we're going to have quite a bit of patience here, because he did say that this is going to take a bit of time. But once you got the machine oiled up in a particular way, it will just run itself. And I think you can see Monaco now doing that, because he said that he in this position there, he's one of his tasks that when he wants to leave and such is to hire someone suitable for that. Now Monaco are just churning up players left, right, and centre now. They seem to be a really, really good financial club. But I think his direction around that, and talking about the qualities of Eddie Howe that he saw, which I think was really interesting. They talked about Eddie Howe's man-to-man management and the personal development is one of the things that attracted him to Newcastle, which really stood out to me because I was just like, that's really cool. That's really interesting because let's face it, Eddie Howe does have that unique quality. And now and again, I do have to remind ourselves of the transformation of Joe Linton. I don't think that transformation of Joe Linton would have happened without Eddie Howe. I'm going to have to put it out there right now.
Yeah.
Not many of the managers would have done that, I don't think. Maybe some, maybe Pep could have done. I don't know. I'm theorizing, right? We don't have the evidence of that. But my point is that he really sees the nurture of like bringing in, like you said, the age down the profile of the squad, bringing young players in, those players that you can see they have the performance, they have the ability to go to the next level, but with the coaching, it will help them reach that next level. Because that's when you're able to buy these players on, let's say, a relatively like good price. Like we're talking about like 18-year-olds that are not going to be too expensive and stuff. Then the coaching and the performance will take them to the next level.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's definitely going to give us that impetus and that injection we need. Like, very much got that deep analytical mind, attention to detail, and very much he was coming across with that seriousness of I want to win things, I want to achieve things, but also being realistic with that. Like you said, it's going to take time. What I liked was he clearly showed like a real collaborative approach. And I know we talked about Eddie's sort of Jekyll and Hyde interviews, but he was clearly outlining that he wants to work together with Eddie, which I thought was really positive. And I think he was indicating things. So, by the way, he also touched on his role with the women's team, which I think
He
is
did, yeah.
fantastic. I think it's fantastic. He's already talking about, let's see if we can try and get them promoted. So that's another thing. This is what I'm talking about. It's like it's moving the whole club forward. It's not a petty situation. It's a massive thing. He's trying to help everyone. That's the impetus of the role. But yeah, talking with what Darren Eales said, he matched up with that by talking about the injuries and his relationship with James Bunce and why he's brought him in, because he feels with issues like that, they need to have the best in class in order to move forward. But yeah, interesting that he said their philosophies are similar, i.e., his and Eddie's. But he also sort of reflected a bit on what Darren Eales also mentioned. Darren talked about working with what we have, right? Which is maybe why we're having a quiet summer, which I'm a little bit worried about. He talks about key differences, and that the challenge in the window is how can we become better? I think we can see at least 4 or 5 positions we can become better. But he was talking about a micro and strategic approach where the difference could be 1 or 2 positions and not an overall rebuild, because he's saying don't really want to unsettle foundation. So that is interesting because that indicate why we've been quiet and that we might only literally have 1 or 2 signings to lower our expectations. Because again, I know Darren Eales talked about, yes, it's the beginning of a new PSR cycle, but don't get carried away.
Can't overspend.
Don't overspend. We can't overspend. But then he talks about these 2 sponsorship deals that could be coming through. And the rumors I heard is it's the Premier League that have delayed on these being approved. Like,
Right.
they should have gone through a while back. In fact, they were hoping they would, so they wouldn't have to sell any key players, but we couldn't get that injection of cash. So, like I said, it feels very much like not only that Paul Mitchell is an appointment by the board, but him and Darren Eales are singing from the same hymn sheet right now. And it looks like his appointment is not only going to benefit our performance, the situation with the injuries, the recruitment, but he's going to broaden us and our ambitions to a wider scale. To a global scale, giving us a wider reach. But he's also going to help support the women's team as well. So when we look at Eddie, I'm afraid to say it, and people may not want to hear this, but head coach, his role as head coach is as a custodian. And I think some fans, and I'm not criticizing them, like they go on like Eddie's their dad or something, their brother. Like we got to let go of that and think about Newcastle United Football Club. You know, we can't have sort of tribalism when we've got pro Eddie, pro not. No, we're just all pro Newcastle United. And if the board are saying this is the direction we're meant to be heading in, this is what we're planning, let's get behind the club and the board. Eddie forms one part of that.
That's
So
a really valid point.
at the moment, Paul Mitchell being in, you could argue, at least for our immediate future, is more vital than Eddie currently being in post. Because if the
Absolutely.
system works well, the idea is we can have any head coach come in and theoretically make it work. So he needs to get with the picture. But so do some of our fans that are like, everything's okay, everything's fine. You know, and that, do you know what I mean? Like, we need to just snap out of that now. We know what the vision is now. Let's get moving.
Yeah, because I see it online where people, if they say one thing, people might look at you but, oh, you Eddie Howe out kind of thing, and then it's like negative around that. And once again, I think you made a really valid point about we are all pro Newcastle. We want the club to do well. I support Newcastle, the club, you know, and you know, it's nothing just the men's senior team. I support the women's team as well. So happy for them being promoted again. And if they do it again, boy, this is, you know, we're going to be on top flight before we know it, which is really, really exciting. And hope we can start catching the games on TV and such. But yeah, I think when you talk about the management side of things, we're going to get into this next little clip now from our co-host, Mr. D-Man, who's once again at the pool sipping a margarita. I don't know what he's drinking, you know, with the umbrella inside. He's drinking something smooth. But we got another clip from him where he mentions something quite interesting as well. Listen to this.
Now, the question is, if Eddie Howe was to leave, probably for the England job, right? Who were your choices to replace him? There's a lot of talk about Pochettino. Other managers been mentioned. Who's your guys' choices?
Wow.
Now, this is
big question.
I thought about this. Now, I'm gonna say this off the bat straight up that I think it's one of those things. I like to say I was right, but remember I did say in our group chat that I got a theory. You know, I've got a theory that if Eddie Howe was to leave, Pochettino could come in. And I'm starting to realize a lot more other people are now saying that. Now, Pochettino is an interesting one because I feel like he does have the characteristics. He's a good coach, end of the day. He is a good coach, and I do like his style of football. And it's also very attacking football. And also, he does have the past relationship with Mitchell at Southampton and Spurs. And don't get me wrong, those appointments were a long time ago, but the rekindle of the friendship, the relationship, it could happen quite well. Because, you know, I do wonder though, if Eddie Howe was to leave for England, a bit like how PIF just pulled the strings with sporting director Paul Mitchell, would they just pull the string for an actual, you know, I don't like calling this label, like everyone's using the word like elite, but you get the idea. You pull in a top head coach, an elite head coach, because PIF are just going to be like, I want the top, I want the best. There's no secret behind it. PIF, they want to be number one. And I do wonder if Eddie Howe was to go for the England job, we are essentially definitely hitting our next phase of this project. And he's going to ramp up to get a coach in. He's going to be like, right, your appointment is going to be for the next 5 years. Let's go.
So you're going with Pochettino then?
I think possibly, but I think there are definitely a few other coaches around the world right now who could be an interesting one. Now, I know one of your favorites, one of your guys, the tactical magician, is Amorim. And I think he will be a very good person to come in. And, you know, he's never been in the Premier League before, so that would be good as well. I would like to see, if I had it my way, it'd be nice to have a fresh face coming to Newcastle who hasn't had history with other clubs in the Premiership, which is obviously quite a unique thing, quite hard thing to do. Let's face it, Premiership managers, they're just like recycled, man. Managers just jump from one club to another. The whole loyalty thing has gone out the window a long time ago. Before, back in the day, you would never see a manager go to another club that is easy as that. But nowadays, money talks. So I don't know. Who have you got in your mind? Who do you think you would like to see come in?
Couple of options. I think number one, they have to be a winner. And my view on Poch is he's a great coach. He's getting to the point where he's slightly outdated, because you're getting, apparently there were Chelsea players complaining about his training methods, a lot of running, too much running. So does that mean we're
Interesting.
sticking with the sort of more Eddie Howe-esque high press athletes running?
Athletes.
Now the thing
Hitting
with
track.
Amorim is his potential is clear to see, because he won the cup with Braga, who clearly have a much lesser budget than the other big three teams. And then he then goes to Sporting and wins their first league title in 20 years. And again, we know the beasts that Benfica and Porto are, even compared to Sporting. So he's shown his talent, and in the Europa League, they knocked out Arsenal, and they showed a good display in the Champions League. A couple of interesting ones to me. Sergio Conceição done an amazing job with Porto. They had a great campaign in Champions League last season as well. But I know Sir Bobby historically was like, I was going to sign this player, and then I think the 2-2 draw, we drew at San Siro against Inter Milan. Conceição kept diving, and he was like, yeah, that put me off signing the player. So I wonder if his spirit would rest easy if that Sergio Conceição joined us as manager. But he is available. He is available, and he's a winner. The other one, though, I think could be a masterstroke is Ernesto Valverde. Now, not because I just want us to get Nico Williams and any other sort of treasured little players Bilbao might have undercover, but Bilbao is quite a partisan club. You know, we know about sort of Basque independence and things like that, and there's things akin to being a Geordie. So I think he would buy into the club. And we saw last season, I think when we played them in the pre-season friendly, the club showed some videos about the history we have with Athletic Bilbao. I think it was based on the UEFA Cup game back in 1994 or 95 or something. So we've got a
Mhm.
good relationship with that club. And his team, they won the King's Cup, or the Spanish equivalent of the FA Cup last season. And
Right.
Bilbao, as we know, have a much smaller budget than a lot of other clubs, and yet they play really entertaining football. So
Mm.
Ernesto Valverde would be a huge masterstroke, you know, getting to our club. But ideally, whoever we get in, it has to be a winner. I feel we need a winner now, and
Mm.
I'm going to be transparent with you about Eddie. I don't think Eddie's going to reach the peaks that he's reached already. I think he's peaked already. I think it's coming down. And whilst his stock's coming down, the England job's arguably the biggest job you could have in the country. He may as well take it for his own PR. It's very evident with the moves the board has made. We're starting a new chapter.
Mm.
It might be a good time to part ways. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Where I've got fond memories of Eddie. I know last year didn't end the best, but there was a lot of circumstances in that. But it was still some positives in the season. So I think overall, he's kind of got credit in the bank. If he left, he'll be very fondly remembered.
Yeah.
If we start off badly this season and he gets sacked, that's damaging for him. Not only has he missed out on an opportunity, the England job, but again, his stock tanks a little bit, doesn't it? So
Yeah. It's a really interesting one where I don't, even though he says he's committed to Newcastle, part of me doesn't quite believe it. A part of me feels like, because the FA haven't yet approached him yet and offered him the job. They haven't done that yet. But I think when they do, I think he will take it, because people say, oh, it will come again in his career. He can do it later. And I was like, I don't think it will. I don't think it will. His stock is so high right now. And like you said, if we do start the season and it doesn't start that well, and he ends up just dropping out from the club, it doesn't look good. And you know, his stock and his credit in the bank is a little bit there. You can see it. You can see it, but it's fading a little bit. I will say it's fading because face it, I think Newcastle not qualifying for Europe for last season, the season just finished. I think it was a failure. I think it was. I think the board expected it and we didn't do it. And the fact that we finished 7th and we're banking on City to beat United in the FA Cup final says it all, really. It's just like, that's not how you like do business. And I know I don't want to trigger the trauma, but those games leading up to like finishing the season, there's 10 last games, man. And how we just didn't. And I have to say it, like there were some games where I felt like Eddie was at the helm where he could have made some changes and we could have seen the game out and won. But we didn't get the game over the line, especially against certain teams who, to be honest, on paper, you expect Newcastle to beat, and we didn't. Here we are now, you know, and it is what it is. But I think it's going to be interesting. I think this Eddie Howe in England job position is going to heat up throughout the next week or so. More and more rumblings are going to happen. I don't think it's over yet. Apparently now there's a rumor today that things have been settled now a bit between Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell and stuff. Apparently, I don't know how true that is. You know, people just saying stuff. But we'll see how it goes, basically. We'll see.
And can these in the know accounts please chill out, man? A lot of them are chatting absolute fraff. I just ignore them now. But you're just seeing it pop up all over Twitter. You're just like, shut up, man. You don't know anything. You don't know anything. And what makes me laugh is when they're wrong, they don't apologize. They're not, oh, like, sorry. Do you know what I mean?
We got another bit to get into, and just to wrap up the show now, is we got to talk about transfers. Now, before we get into that, we're going to hear from Mr. Co-host, Mr. D-Man himself, to hear his thoughts about the current situation.
Yo, while I'm here, am I the only one a bit alarmed about the lack of transfer activity that's going on? It's not long till the season starts and we got a couple key positions to be filled. I'm not seeing us. I know the club moves in silence and whatnot, but I'm a bit worried, lads. What do you reckon?
Now,
don't stress out on holiday, D-Man. Don't stress out on holiday.
No, he's meant to be relaxing, and here he is, like stressing. But I have to admit, I am a bit worried. It seems a bit too quiet. But on reflection, what you said earlier is getting me thinking a bit about the fact that we could be only going for 2 players this window, which I feel like we need more than 2 players. I think we've got to look at the situation at the moment, the current situation. It's been reported that Callum Wilson is injured. So currently we have one striker, Isaac. Now, before that injury occurred, obviously, I think as fans, we're all thinking about the right wing position. We need a strike. We need a right wing person. We need a right wing person. We need the right centre back. We need the right centre back. We need the right centre back. But I'm now thinking I think minimum, we need 3 signings. Minimum. If I could have it my way, I wouldn't mind 4. And if the 4th one was like a loan move, I'd take it right now. Do you know what I mean? And speaking about loan, there's some crazy stuff in the news about loans, about certain players from like Man City, right? So there's stuff about Oscar Bob coming in properly for a loan. Apparently we're interested. Don't know how true that is. Once again, speculation. Don't get me wrong, Oscar Bob is a fantastic player, and I still got flashbacks in my mind when he scored that goal against us, right? So we know that he's a good player. But at the same time, his price tag will not be cheap. Man City are not going to let him off cheap. And I think it was yourself, once again, in our group chat, you were saying about they probably made a mistake with Cole Palmer, Man City, when they let go to Chelsea so cheaply, right? And I think they do got a buyback clause. Do they?
I can't remember. I don't think so.
But anyway, I feel like they're going to learn a lesson up here of like, they don't want to like suddenly give us Oscar Bob and next moment my man's like top goal scorer of the season. But yeah, there's just, as usual on socials, there's just like a few rumblings. And let's get into a few of them now. So obviously, there's been constant rumblings about the centre back on the right for Malik Four. I want to say his name if I'm not saying it correctly.
I'm gonna say Tiao.
Tiao.
The only reason I'm gonna say that is because I'm thinking of the athlete Nafti Tiam.
Right.
It looks the same, but instead of a M, it's a W. It's kind of like turning it upside down, actually. But
Right.
that's a guess.
Malik Tiao. I'll take that. He's currently playing for AC Milan, and it seems to be we're quite keen on him. And once again, a young player. Just to say, all the players we kind of be rumored with are young. So that's a good insight that we are going for young profile players, right? We're not going for like, not to say this age is even old, but we're not going for like 29-year-olds in the football world, because that is players who are coming quite close to the end of their career. But what do you think? Do you think there's Malik Tau would something that get over the line, or hopefully?
Hopefully. I mean, I'll be lying to you if I said I'd seen him play. So I haven't. But the stuff I've heard about him is good. He's got a lot of sort of physical attributes, very quick, very strong. But he's actually meant to be a really good passer of the ball. He had 90% pass accuracy last season, and made 21 appearances for AC Milan, who finished second in the league. So, he's playing a high level of football. Young talent, age 22. So now apparently the reported fee is 34 million that AC Milan want. Now it may seem expensive for a young talent, but if they've got a high ceiling, and we've talked about it, if we look to sell him on in 3-4 seasons time, we could potentially get double that. And actually, when you look at the options that are kind of comparative to him, similar age groups and stuff. We talked about Lenny Yoro earlier. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate that Man United were bolshy and they paid the money up front, but 58
A
million is a
lot of
lot of
money.
money. I think he's 19, Lenny Yoro. He's still quite young.
hmm
And we know that Jared Branthwaite, that Everton have been asking for sort of the region of 70 to 80 million. So all of a sudden, 34 million does look kind of cheap. Can't complain about that.
Yeah, I think once again, I haven't seen too much of what this player's like, but from what I see when people sharing the stats, they all got the screenshot of the stats and stuff, and I think they were comparing him to like Fabian Schär and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, this feels like a good successor to follow up. And also, the other one floating around, like I mentioned before, a bit earlier, Oscar Bob and Rico Lewis as well. Man City just got players in abundance, but I'll take any of those two. But I think the fees, like we said, would be too much money, way too much. And even if we do a loan to buy, I think the price tag would be so expensive. I can't see it happening personally. I think that's just
I
what
don't
you.
think they're looking to give us an obligation. I think that it's basically 80 million plus a season-long loan. But it reminds me, it's not the same value, but it reminds me of when I think are we looking at 4 seasons ago now? This is how quick time's moved on. When Man City were after Harry Kane and they offered 50 million plus Jesus and Bernardo Silva, who was out of favour at the time. And
Crazy.
obviously Spurs said no.
Yeah. I don't know. It's such a weird one. It does feel like a dare I say it, agent driven kind of thing that's on social media, maybe. But yeah, that's about it really. And I think there was another player that come up today actually, which was a white wing. I think he was playing for Bilbao,
Diao or something? Musa
something like that.
Diao
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah, it's just a new one that's come up. But once again, it's just I don't know. Reports are coming from various sources that we could be interested. We're looking to talk to them and such, but we'll see how it goes. But other than that, it is definitely all quiet on the Western front. And just to think, this time last summer, we already announced the signing of Tonali. So put that in perspective on what you will, but it does feel a bit quiet. But I'm hoping things get done soon, because one of the things that was worrying me is that we got this tour in Japan coming up soon, our little preseason little tour in Japan. and we might start that tour with no signings, which is like crazy to me. I know people will say, "Oh, we signed Kelly, we signed Ruddy," and listen, I'm not counting those players in, right? First of all, Kelly's rumored to be injured, right? He's injured, so I'm not even counting him. He won't be playing probably. And we got two
Roddy ain't
goalkeepers.
gonna be playing.
Ruddy won't be playing. Oddie, what
Oh,
his name
remember
is.
Oddie played already. Remember they had the close. Sorry, guys, we had the closed behind doors friendly, didn't we? Against I can't pronounce it. Is it Unterhaching,
Mm,
the
mm,
third tier German club. We beat them 3-1, and
mm,
I think Nick Pope played a half, and then Oddie played a half. Lo and behold, we conceded a goal in the second half when Oddie's
mm,
playing.
mm. So once again, we just have to see what happens. I'm hoping that something just comes out of nowhere and it's just done, and I go, "Oh, okay, that's how we're moving in silence." But hopefully something will come through. But anyway, I think that is it for today's episode. Thank you for everyone for tuning in and listening and watching. Really appreciate it. Once again, 90s Mags, Newcastle United podcast is available here on YouTube, but also you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Subscribe, like, stay tuned, keep it locked. That's me signing out. AC and Jefferson, salute.
We out. Peace.